No one remembers when the Emperor last opened his eyes. No one alive, at least. The legends say that if he ever did, the stars themselves would weep, and every human soul would tremble under the weight of his gaze. Yet here we are, 10,000 years since his flesh was nailed to the golden throne, and still the Imperium prays to a corpse that burns brighter than suns, sustained by 100,000 screaming souls each day. They say the Emperor is the beacon of mankind, the light in the warp. But have you ever wondered what light looks like when it burns too long? When the fire no longer purifies, but devours? In the cathedrals of Terra, pilgrims collapse before colossal statues, weeping blood, whispering his name. In the depths of the Astronomicon, psychers are consumed one by one, their minds peeled away like the rind of fruit, their essence cast into the throne to keep the Astronomicon lit. They call it salvation, they call it duty, but the air tastes like iron and the walls hum with hunger. What if the Emperor isn't sleeping? What if he's dreaming? And in that dream, he's forgotten what humanity even looks like. Because across the warp, whispers echo from ships lost centuries ago. Whispers of a presence that is not benevolent, not divine, but something else. A mind stretched thin across eternity, a god forced to stare forever into the screaming void he once defied. And the priests keep chanting, the gears keep turning, and the golden throne keeps consuming. The Emperor endures, but endurance is not the same as life. And those who claim to serve him may not realize what they're truly feeding. There are secrets beneath the palace, beneath the sanctified gold and marble, chambers that smell of old blood and burnt circuitry, where no light dares linger, and the silence feels aware. If you listen closely enough, you might hear it. A pulse beneath the metal, slow, measured, and in that pulse, the memory of something that was once human. They say the Golden Throne is the heart of the Imperium, but in truth, it is its wound, a wound that never heals, a machine that eats the souls of men so that one ancient dream might continue to breathe. Deep within the Palace of Terra, beneath mountains of marble and sanctified steel, the throne hums like the heartbeat of a dying god. Thousands of conduits pulse with psychic fire, carrying screams through conduits that twist like veins. Every second, somewhere in that labyrinth, a soul is extinguished, its essence stripped clean and poured into the Emperor's eternal fire. To the faithful, this is sacred. To the priests, it is proof of his divinity. But to those who have seen the cables shudder, who have smelled the burned ozone of spent psychers, it feels like standing too close to something that should have died long ago, but refuses to. The mechanicus no longer understands the throne's design. Its original schematics were lost ages ago, consumed in the fires of the Horus heresy. Now they maintain it through ritual and prayer, turning wrenches as they chant psalms, coating broken pipes with sanctified oil as though faith can replace knowledge. And somehow, it works, but the price is unbearable. 100,000 psychers are sacrificed each day to keep the Astronomicon lit. Their minds are burned out, their screams echo through the warp, and still, the Emperor hungers. Some claim he is dying. Others claim he is becoming something new, something that no longer belongs to flesh or light. But the oldest priests, the ones who've served longest in the throne's shadow, say nothing. Their faces are hidden beneath gilded masks, and their eyes are empty. They've seen too much, because sometimes, in the dim glow of the throne's chamber, they see movement, the faint twitch of a finger, the flicker of an eye beneath a shroud of gold. And in those moments, they whisper one prayer above all others: please, do not wake. The Sanctum Imperialis is not a place for human voices. Within those endless halls, silence is law, a silence so deep it feels like a living presence. Only the footsteps of the custodes break it, slow and deliberate, echoing through corridors carved from the bones of the earth itself. They say the Emperor does not sleep, that his mind still watches over mankind, flickering like a dying sun. But even the most devout whisper that what dreams inside that golden shell is not what he once was. The priests of silence tend to hymn, a brotherhood of robed figures who have long since traded their voices for obedience. They are not seen outside the throne's chamber. They do not eat or rest or speak. Their faces are hidden behind masks of smooth gold, and beneath their robes, tubes of black ichor feed into their veins. No one knows how long they have served. Some claim they are not men at all, but extensions of the throne, servants born from its will. Others believe they were once psychers themselves, their souls stripped clean and left hollow, now bound in eternal servitude to the corpse they worship. Each day, they perform the same sacred rites. They anoint the air with incense thick enough to choke the lungs. They clean the metal of the throne with oils that shimmer with blood-red reflections. And when a new sacrifice is brought before them, they move with terrifying grace, their hands trembling not from fear, but devotion. It is said that to look upon the emperor without sanction is to lose one's mind. The priests have seen him every day for centuries, and yet their eyes remain empty. Perhaps that is the only way they survive, by losing the part of themselves that still understands horror. For in the shadows between the throne's golden ribs, the air ripples like heat on stone. And sometimes, in that shimmer, the priests see things, eyes that are not eyes, shapes that do not belong to flesh, watching them from behind the veil. They never speak of it. They only kneel. The air near the throne is not like the air of the mortal world. It hums, thick and electric, alive with whispers no human tongue could form. Each breath drawn in that sanctum tastes of iron and sanctity, as if the very atmosphere has been steeped in centuries of faith and rot. The light burns gold, yet feels cold against the skin, the reflection of divinity drained of warmth. No mortal stands here long without feeling it, the pull, the weight, the hunger that radiates from the machine. The golden throne does not merely sustain the emperor, it feeds, and what it devours is never truly gone. Psychers, thousands every day, perish in the name of his will. They call it sacrifice, but those who have seen the ritual know it for what it is, consumption. Their bodies crumble, but their essence lingers, devoured and converted into power. 100,000 souls die daily to keep the light of the astronomicon burning. 100,000 silent screams to hold the void at bay. There are moments, brief, blasphemous moments, when the priests swear they hear it breathe. The sound is like wind drawn through broken glass, heavy and deliberate. The chamber trembles and the light flickers, and for a heartbeat they feel the universe tilt, as if the emperor himself stirred. They bow lower, trembling, their faith a fragile dam against the flood of terror that grips them, for in that sound there is no mercy, no love, no human recognition. There is only the grinding pulse of an endless will, something ancient, chained and starving. It is said the throne has become more than a machine. Some whisper it grows, its golden surface shifting ever so slightly, like flesh remembering what it once was. The pipes that feed into the emperor's form pulse faintly, not with liquid, but with something thicker, a luminous substance that seems alive. No one knows whether it comes from him, or the throne, or the countless psychers whose souls are bound within its circuits. Once, a custodian spoke of seeing movement within the veins of gold that run across the throne's structure. He was never seen again. The priests erased his name from the archives as if he had never existed, because to acknowledge such a thing, to admit that the throne itself might be changing, would mean accepting a horror too vast for even the Imperium's faith to contain. And yet, deep within the silence, the priests kneel, breathing the heavy air, their bodies trembling as they whisper the same prayer over and over, not out of hope, but desperation. For they can no longer tell if they pray to a god, or to something that has replaced him. There is a silence that lives beneath the chanting, an older, deeper quiet that no human voice can pierce. The priests hear it sometimes between their hymns, when the organs falter and the vox horns hiss with static. It is not mere stillness, but a listening silence, patient and aware. Within it, something ancient waits. The adepts who serve the throne are forbidden to speak of this silence, yet they all feel it. It seeps through the metal and the marble, through the gold-lacquered floors where centuries of incense have built up a crust of ash. The older ones swear that the silence speaks when the power fluxes, not in words but in impressions. Thoughts like pressure behind the skull, images of burning stars, the taste of blood on the tongue, a voice that feels like drowning in light. Those who linger too long beneath the throne begin to change. Their eyes grow hollow, their skin pale as wax, their dreams filled with visions of impossible geometries. cities of gold and bone spiraling forever. Some vanish into the machine, pulled by its cables and conduits, their bodies lost in the pulsing veins of the structure. The priests say they were chosen. Others whisper that the throne hungers still, consuming not just psychers but the very souls of its servants. In the archives of the adeptus mechanicus, sealed behind sigils none dare break, there are fragments of older schematics, drawings that show a throne far simpler, more mechanical. The modern design, with its organic curvature and shifting veins of gold, appears nowhere in the official blueprints. When the tech priests of Mars ask why, the High Lords answer only with silence. Perhaps even they do not know what their god machine has become. Sometimes, during the long watches of the night, the custodians guarding the throne hear faint murmurs, voices not human, layered atop one another like echoes in a cavern. They sound almost like prayers recited backward or names spoken in reverse. One custodian described it as the sound of reality breathing wrong. He requested reassignment the next day. His armor was later found folded neatly beside the throne. His body never recovered. It is said that beneath the throne, deep in the rock of Terra itself, lies a labyrinth of forgotten vaults and catacombs, chambers sealed since before the heresy. Rumor claims that within them are remnants of the Emperor's earliest experiments, things that still stir when the throne pulses. The priests deny their existence, yet sometimes through the great covered vents, a low hum rises from below, harmonizing perfectly with the heartbeat of the machine above. There is a growing belief among the silent few that the Emperor no longer dreams of humanity's salvation, that his mind, stretched across millennia of suffering, has drifted somewhere else, into the void between stars, or perhaps into something far beyond mortal comprehension. The throne may be they said the Emperor's light could never dim. That was the lie upon which every shrine, cathedral, and holy war had been built. Yet within the marble lungs of the ecclesiarchal palace, even the air had begun to doubt that promise. Cardinal Verex could feel it in the silence between his own breaths, the subtle hesitation of prayer machines that once hummed in perfect litany. The censers still swung from their brass chains, bleeding incense into the vaulted dark, but the smell had changed. The sacred oils once smelled of sanctity and old parchment. Now they carried a hint of something sour, the decay of faith itself. The corridors of the ecclesiarchy were not empty, but they had grown quieter. Choirs once sang until their throats bled. Now, their hymns faltered mid-verse, as if the air had forgotten how to carry sound. The cardinal walked beneath frescoes depicting the emperor as a golden colossus, his face carved from idealized mercy. But Verex no longer saw a god in those eyes. He saw exhaustion. The data slates brought by his aides offered numbers. Fewer successful pilgrimages, more recorded heresies, sporadic fluctuations in the Astronomican's brightness. But numbers were only the skin of the truth. The bones beneath were terror. The ecclesiarchy had begun to whisper that perhaps the throne no longer burned as it once had. Some said the emperor's spirit was migrating, fracturing across the warp like light through stained glass. Others claimed the custodians had locked their gates tighter, refusing even the High Lord's entry. Verex stopped before a sealed obsidian door at the far end of the sanctum. Behind it was the Vox chamber, where confessions were made to the unseen, where mortals attempted to speak to divinity through static. Few dared to enter anymore. He pressed his palm against the sigil plate. The seal hissed open. Inside, the chamber was lit only by the glow of the Vox altar, a device older than most worlds. Thousands of cables dangled from its spine, each ending in a speaker or tube or metallic mouthpiece, each dripping wax and sacred oil. The floor was slick with condensation. The machine sweated like a living creature. Verex knelt before it. "O master of mankind," he began, voice quivering. "I come not as a priest, but as a child seeking the hand of his father." The machine crackled. No voice answered. "I have seen the signs," he continued. "The failing of faith, the dimming flame. The people grow desperate. I beg you, send us proof of your watchfulness." The Vox grills began to whisper. Not one, but many, 1,000 overlapping murmurs. "Verex froze. Proof," said one distorted. "Child," said another as if drawn from the breath of the dying. "Faith is not fuel. It is meat." Verex stumbled backward, eyes wide. The sound was wrong. Not holy, not human. It wasn't even words at the end, just a vibration that felt like teeth grinding against glass. He ripped the vox cord from his ear, panting. Behind him, the incense burners flared. The next dawn came gray and hollow. It should have risen in gold, spilling light over the spires of the imperial palace, but instead it crawled like a wounded animal across the horizon, pale, hesitant, sickly. The smog of billions of chimneys hung thick in the air, and the sun above Terra seemed dimmed, as though it too mourned something unspeakable. On the processional road, the faithful still came. Pilgrims from across the stars, ash-stained, half-starved, their skin blistered from radiation and distance, pressed forward in endless waves, chanting litanies that no longer sounded certain. The words of devotion had taken on the rhythm of pleading. In the crowd, a pilgrim named Corvin tried to raise his head high enough to see the palace gates. He'd been walking for 7 years from a world he could barely remember, through systems torn by warp storms and famine. All he had left was the crude reliquary hanging around his neck, a fragment of metal etched with what he believed to be the Emperor's sigil. But when he reached the gate, there were no custodians waiting, no priests, no welcoming incense. Only silence. The immense adamantine doors of the palace loomed above, sealed, unlit. Even the air seemed to withdraw from that place, like lungs refusing to breathe. Corvin fell to his knees. "My lord," he whispered, "I have come home." His voice was swallowed by the void. Others began to notice. A ripple passed through the multitudes, first confusion, then fear. They whispered among themselves that perhaps this was a test, that the Emperor would reveal himself through their patience. Hours passed, then days. The smell of bodies began to taint the wind. Within the lower districts, the rumors changed shape. Whispers carried by dust and dread told of cardinals who had stopped preaching, of custodians who refused even the high. Lord's entry of blood spilling in the vox chambers as priests tried to summon divine replies and heard only screams. By the 7th day, the first heretical sect had emerged. They called themselves the Witnessed, claiming that they had seen the Emperor's true form in their dreams, not radiant and merciful, but vast and broken, his eyes empty sockets leaking molten light. They spoke of a truth too terrible for faith, a truth that could not be prayed away. The Arbites tried to silence them. The Skitarii garrison at the eastern wall opened fire when the Witnessed refused dispersal, but their corpses burned with a strange luminescence, a shimmering gold that refused to fade even as their flesh blackened. To the crowd, it looked like miracle. That was when the riots began. From the towers of the Administratum to the slums below the mechanicus habs, the fear of silence became the new hymn. Pilgrims broke into the shrines, demanding to see the Emperor's face. Some tore apart icons, convinced they were false. Others anointed themselves in ash and oil, swearing to be. The palace was quieter than the void between stars. Even the servitors that polished its gold-veined floors seemed to move slower, as if burdened by invisible weight. The scent of incense had faded, replaced by the metallic tang of ozone and old machinery. Inside those immense halls, where once the footfalls of custodians had echoed like thunder, now only one remained awake on his watch. His name was Iolon, shield captain of the Dawn Spear cohort. For millennia he had stood among the chosen, the Emperor's guardians, his angels of gold. He had seen empires rise and fall from the steps of the throne room. His armor never dulled, his faith never cracked. Yet now, standing before the sealed adamantine doors, he felt something worse than fear. He felt uncertainty. The throne had not sung in days. Normally, even through the layers of vault steel, one could hear it. That faint electric hum, that unearthly vibration that was not heard so much as felt in the bones. The song of the Emperor's breath, transmitted through the mechanisms of the Golden Throne and the souls of 1,000 psychers dying each day to feed it. But now it was gone. He had sent word through Vox channels to the others. No response. He had attempted to commune through the palace's command links. Silence. Even the noosphere was a tomb. He stood there for hours, unmoving. Custodians were trained for eternity. Patience was carved into their DNA. But the quiet was different this time. It was not absence. It was presence. Something vast, something alive was pressing from the other side of that door. When the first whisper came, Iolon thought it was the air cycling through his armor vents. It wasn't. The voice did not speak in words, but in shapes of thought, flickers of sensation behind the eyes. He saw the surface of the throne, molten and radiant, rippling like living metal. He saw a hand, vast beyond measure, pushing through golden light. Then he heard the sound, a sound like a dying star inhaling. He staggered back. His armor's internal servos whined in protest. Even the fiber of his being resisted the implication of what he'd just felt. The Emperor did not move. He could not. That was the foundation of 10,000 years of order. If the throne stirred, if something shifted within, then everything they knew about life, death, and godhood was a lie. The light above the gate flickered. He approached the sealed doors, pressing his gauntlet against the sigil of the imperial aquila. The metal was cold, colder than it had ever been. Beneath that chill was a pulse, faint but rhythmic, as though the palace itself were breathing. "I am Ialon, shield captain of the Dawn Spear," he said aloud, though there was no one to hear him. "By the throne's command, I stand eternal." Something inside him, some deep human remnant, wanted to kneel, to beg for the sound of the throne's song again. Instead, he drew his guardian spear and stood straight. The air rippled. For an instant, his helm's optics failed. When they cleared, the walls of the corridor were shifting, the frescoes depicting the Great Crusade now showing unfamiliar scenes. The Emperor, the adamantine doors split open with a sound that was not mechanical, but organic. A slow exhalation, like lungs too old to draw breath. A wave of heat rolled outward, thick with the scent of incense, burnt copper, and something faintly human, the unmistakable odor of decay restrained by ritual and machine. Ialon stepped forward, his every motion weighted with disbelief. The throne room of the Emperor, the holiest place in existence, should have been blinding, radiant, filled with the divine hum of power. But instead, the air was dark, trembling with dust motes that drifted like falling embers. At the center, where once the golden throne blazed like a sun in miniature, there was only shadow. The light that reached it did not reflect. It bent, drawn inward as if devoured. He advanced slowly, each step echoing like a judgment through the cavernous hall. The once living saints that ringed the chamber, entombed in gilded reliquaries, were silent. Their once burning eyes were cold gems, now dulled to obsidian. When Ialon reached the base of the throne, he could no longer trust what he saw. The machinery was still, its tubes dry, its conduits silent. The Emperor's withered body, which he had glimpsed once before across the eons, was no longer visible. Instead, there was movement. Something glistened in the dark recess. Not flesh, not metal, but a slow shimmer like oil upon water. His helm's augers failed to define its structure. Every time he tried to focus, it changed. Sometimes it was a man seated. Sometimes a pillar of light. Sometimes nothing at all. A faint sound rose from within it. Thousands of overlapping whispers. They came from no single source, instead seeping through every inch of the hall, every relic, every icon. And though the words were indistinct, the emotion was unmistakable. Hunger. Ialon dropped to one knee before the throne. His voice shook for the first time in millennia. "My lord," he said, "your servant stands before you. Speak that I may hear." The light pulsed. For a moment, the chamber's air thickened, the heat tightening around him like invisible chains. He felt his mind pulled, threads of thought drawn out, unraveling toward the throne. Visions struck him like blades, worlds burning, the sky cracked open, the Astronomicon darkening as psychers screamed in unison. He saw the Emperor as he had been, radiant, wrathful, human. And then, as he was now, vast and unrecognizable, consciousness scattered across the warp. Fragmenting and reassembling endlessly, Ialon screamed without sound. His vox link dead, his voice lost in the storm of light. For a heartbeat, he saw faces, millions of them, flickering through the shadow. The faithful, the condemned, the uncountable dead who had prayed for salvation. Their eyes glowed within the void like distant stars, all looking at him. He stumbled backward, clutching his head. The whispers became words, countless voices speaking as one. "I see you." The phrase echoed not through sound but through meaning, etched directly into his mind. He fell to his knees again, armor scraping against the marble floor. I live to serve," he gasped. "Command me, Father. Silence. Then a single thought, clear and merciless. Why? The question shattered him. For 10,000 years, his existence had been purpose, obedience, vigilance, faith. The Emperor was not to be questioned, only obeyed. Yet now that voice, whether divine or something else, had turned the question upon him. He tried to answer. Words failed. All he could feel was the vast, crushing weight of doubt. A tremor shook the palace. Dust rained from the arches above. The throne pulsed again, brighter this time, and from within its shifting glow emerged a figure, tall, draped in ruinous gold. Its face was not visible, only a blur of radiance and shadow. When it spoke, the air itself vibrated. "You kept watch," it said, but not faith. The door to the throne room sealed behind Iolon with a hiss that reminded him of the ocean's breath, an impossible sound upon a world where seas had been long forgotten. The echo of it lingered, as if the chamber itself regretted letting him go. He stood motionless for a long while, gauntlets trembling faintly against his knees. The corridor before him stretched into infinity, its golden surfaces dulled by centuries of dust. Statues of angels loomed above, their wings darkened by soot, their eyes hollowed where gems once gleamed. Every echo of his footsteps came back distorted, like someone else was walking just behind him. The scent of incense had faded. What lingered now was something different, metallic, sharp, faintly organic. The air carried a pulse. He realized, with mounting dread, that the sound was coming from within the walls. Servitors lined the passage in their thousands, built into the structure itself, an endless series of half-living forms. Their bodies fused to machines that kept the palace alive. For millennia, their voices had been silent. Their eyes had been blind. Now one of them blinked. It was only a flicker, almost imperceptible. But to Iolon, it was enough. He froze. The servitor's eyes followed him, and then another's, then 100. The corridor filled with the soft whirring of cranial augmetics, lenses focusing, muscles twitching. By the throne, Iolon whispered. The servitors began to murmur. Not in words, but in static, a faint rising chorus of electrical noise that scraped at his mind. Their lips, most long-rotted, moved without breath. Their voices layered upon one another until it formed a single pulsing tone that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He took a step back. The sound grew louder. For a moment, he thought he saw movement beneath their flesh, cables twitching like veins, wires pulsing as though carrying blood instead of current. The walls themselves seemed to shift, and then, through the static, a single voice emerged. Not mechanical, not human, he sees you still. The words hit like a shock through Iolon's spine. He stumbled backward, his armor scraping against the marble. He turned, intending to run back toward the throne room. But the great doors had sealed, golden panels now fused into an unbroken wall. "Who speaks?" he demanded. His voice rang hollow in the vast corridor. No answer came. Only the faint hum of the servitors, their gazes locked upon him. Then one by one they lowered their heads again, dormant as if nothing had happened. The silence returned so suddenly that his ears rang with it. He stood there, armored chest heaving, until the tremor in his hands subsided. His helm's auspex registered nothing unusual. Vox interference was total. For all his training, all his millennia of discipline, he felt like a child again, a soldier who had seen something he was never meant to. He began walking, slower now, each step measured. The corridors curved and descended into darker sections of the palace. Here the gilded walls gave way to bare stone, and the silence deepened into something living. He passed reliquaries whose seals had cracked, their contents devoured by time. Shrines still burned with ghostly light, candles untouched by decay. Each flicker of flame seemed to bend toward him as he passed. At last, he reached the Chamber of Watchers, where when Iolon descended into the lower sanctums of the palace, the air changed. It no longer carried the perfumed incense of devotion, but the damp, earthy stench of something alive. The walls here were not gold but stone, ancient rock older than the Imperium itself, etched with symbols no living tongue could name. It was as if the foundations of Terra still remembered the things that came before mankind's rule, whispering in languages long forgotten. Each step echoed against the stone like a heartbeat out of rhythm. His armor's internal sensors flickered intermittently, registering temperature shifts that made no logical sense. The deeper he went, the stronger it became, that faint rhythmic pulse. Not mechanical, not entirely biological. It was a frequency of willpower, resonating through the stone like breath in a lung that stretched across continents. He passed through corridors filled with what might once have been maintenance servitors, now fused into the architecture by centuries of corrosion and sacred oil. Their limbs had merged with the cables and pipes they were meant to tend. Faces stared out of the walls, eyeless, expressionless, yet somehow aware. The vox lines hissed faintly with whispers, voices half-formed. He dreams. He dreams. The light burns but does not see. Elon ignored them at first. He was a custodian. His faith was not built upon comfort but obedience. Yet, with each step, something within him began to shift, like armor plates grinding out of alignment. He found a shrine deep within the sanctum. Its marble was blackened with soot. Upon it stood a relic, a human skull, perfectly preserved, encased in crystal. The plaque beneath it read only one word: witness. He stared at it for a long time. The skull's hollow sockets reflected the faint red glow of his armor's optics, and for a heartbeat, he thought the reflection blinked. He reached forward, placing a hand upon the crystal, and in that instant the world tilted. He was no longer in the sanctum. He was standing on a plain of ash that stretched to infinity. Above him, a sun burned white and silent. The air smelled of cinders and oil. He looked down. The ground was made of bone dust, and beneath it, the faint outlines of titanic machinery turned slowly like organs beneath skin. The sky pulsed, and from the horizon came a voice soft and human, yet ancient beyond measure. You would guard eternity, it said. But eternity does not want to be guarded. He turned toward the sound, but there was nothing. Only the ash, shifting gently as if exhaling. The sun grew brighter. The ground beneath him cracked. From within the fissures, golden light spilled, not radiant but hungry. It reached toward him like veins seeking blood. Iolon staggered backward, his boots sinking into the ashen surface. The voice continued, calm and absolute. You have served me well, child of the Gene Forge. You were made to stand between me and the stars. But the stars do not kneel. The light surged, engulfing him. He screamed without sound as it poured through his armor, through his flesh, through his mind, not burning, but understanding. For the first time, he saw what the throne truly sustained. It was not the Emperor's will alone. It was the feeding of a God-shaped wound, a wound that never closed. Every life that served, every soul that prayed, was swallowed by that light. When he awoke, he was back in the sanctum, kneeling before the shrine. The crystal skull had cracked down the center, a thin line of golden fluid seeping from it like blood. His hands trembled. The relics on the walls flickered with faint luminescence, each pulse matching the rhythm of his own heart. Was that his vision? He whispered to himself. Or something else? No answer came, only the soft hum of the palace breathing. He rose unsteadily. Somewhere far above, the Astronomicon pulsed in its endless rhythm. He felt it not as a light, but as a heartbeat, resonating through everything, the stones, the walls, the flesh of the world. The Emperor's light was not radiance anymore. It was pressure, presence, a thing that pressed too close to the material realm like a hand pushing through a veil. He began to walk again. The shadows followed. His mind was unraveling into 1,000 threads of memory and devotion, each whispering a different truth. The Emperor as savior. The corridors of the sanctum grew narrower as Iolon advanced, as though the palace itself were closing around him. The light dimmed to a soft amber, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat that no longer felt like his own. Every surface shimmered faintly, not with reflection, but with movement. Slow, deliberate, biological. The walls were breathing. He paused before a great archway sealed by golden doors engraved with 1,000 sigils of warding. Their edges were blackened, the inscriptions eroded by time and radiation. No one had opened this gate in millennia, perhaps not since the Emperor's final breath. Yet as he approached, the doors sighed and opened without command. The chamber beyond was vast, circular, and impossibly silent. At its center stood a monolithic device, a sphere suspended above a dais, its surface alive with streams of golden data sigil and crackling warp light. Beneath it, tendrils of metal and bone coiled like the roots of some great sleeping god. This was the transference core, the deepest layer of the throne's mechanism. The place where mortal energy became divine sustenance. And it was failing. The golden light flickered erratically. The hum of psychic energy that should have been steady was fractured, like an orchestra out of tune. Elon could feel it pressing against his armor, pushing thoughts into his mind that weren't his own. Voices, thousands of them. The psychers whose souls had been burned to fuel this place, their agony folded into eternity. He's still dreaming. One voice whispered, "But he doesn't dream of us." Elon fell to one knee, clutching his helmet as static screamed through his voxlink. He saw flashes, faces, countless faces, all consumed in golden fire. The Emperor's light was no longer sustaining humanity. It was feeding on it. When he looked up, the sphere had changed. It was no longer pure and radiant. Its surface had grown translucent, revealing what lay within. A shape, a man, or what was left of one, suspended in coils of living machinery. His limbs were fused to cables of gold. His chest rose and fell once every minute, each breath a shuddering quake through the room. His skin shimmered with embedded circuitry, and where his eyes should have been, light poured in endless streams. Elon stumbled backward, horror blooming in his chest. He had not meant to see this. None of the custodians were meant to. The Emperor was alive, and he was suffering. Not in deathless peace, not in divine slumber, but in a constant state of disintegration and rebirth, every heartbeat consuming 1,000 souls to delay the inevitable. His body had become the conduit of a god who never wished to be one. The air vibrated. A deep, resonant tone filled the chamber, the sound of divinity trying to speak through broken flesh. And then a voice, vast and intimate, filled Iolan's skull. "You are not meant to see this." He dropped to his knees, the weight of the words pressing into his bones. "My lord, I serve. I have always served." "Service is a form of blindness," the voice replied, echoing not in sound but thought. "You guard what you do not understand. You call me Emperor, yet you do not know what I became." The light intensified, swallowing the chamber in brilliance. For an instant, Elon's armor disintegrated, or perhaps it was simply that he no longer needed it. He stood naked before something that was not man, not God, but a convergence of both, the distilled will of humanity, chained to flesh. The Emperor's form trembled. The golden tendrils connecting him to the sphere pulsed erratically. The machinery surrounding the dais spasmed, as though rejecting its own purpose. "They feed me because they fear the dark beyond the stars," the voice said. "But I do not fear it. I remember it." Visions flooded Iolan's mind. The pre-imperial galaxy, the warp storms, the birth of gods made from thought and pain. He saw the Emperor as he had once been, walking among mortals, guiding them, defying the gods of the warp. And then he saw the truth, that to fight gods, one must become one, and once you are a god, you can never stop hungering. The Emperor's voice faltered, breaking into static. "The throne binds me. It devours what I was and replaces it with what they need me to be." Elon's tears ran down his faceplate. "What do you command of me, Lord?" The silence that followed was longer than time. "Then bear witness, and decide if you would rather serve a god or free a man." The sphere convulsed. Golden light erupted upward, tearing through the ceiling like a spear of burning thought. The psychic backlash hurled Iolan across the floor. Alarms shrieked through his comms. Mechanical prayers began reciting themselves in panic. When the light dimmed, the chamber was still. The sphere's surface had gone dark. The Emperor's body hung motionless, suspended in the ruin of his own machinery. Elon rose slowly. The throne's hum was fading. For the first time in 10,000 years, Terra's heartbeat had skipped, and then, in the darkness, a whisper crawled through the air. Not divine, not holy, but terribly human. "Help me." The whisper lingered in the air like a dying ember. Iolan stood frozen before the throne, the sound replaying in his mind again and again. "Help me." It was not the commanding tone of a god. It was the trembling breath of a man who had forgotten the warmth of life. He wanted to deny it. To call it a hallucination, the echo of psychic bleed from the dying machinery. But no delusion could strike so deep. The words had cut through the layers of indoctrination carved into his mind across centuries. The Emperor, the master of mankind, the God Emperor himself, was asking for help. The custodian took one hesitant step forward. The golden sphere still glowed faintly, its light flickering like a candle's final breath. Every instinct screamed at him to call for reinforcements, to seal the chamber, to erase the memory of what he had seen. But obedience now felt like blasphemy. He approached the dais. The body within the sphere twitched, a faint motion that sent a ripple through the surrounding conduits. The air crackled with static, and fragments of the Emperor's thoughts bled into Iolan's mind, memories and sensations not meant for mortal comprehension. He saw fields of burning stars, worlds consumed by the warp, the fall of gods and the rise of something greater. And beneath it all, he felt loneliness, infinite, suffocating loneliness. The custodian fell to his knees. "My lord, if this is truly your will, speak it plainly. Command me." The air shimmered. The voice that answered was not the thunderous tone of divine decree, but something softer, closer, fragile. "I cannot be freed by command, only by faith." Iolan's heart pounded. "Faith? I have served you all my life." "No," came the reply, a whisper wrapped in pain. "You have obeyed." "There is a difference." The chamber's light flared, revealing shadows of movement along the walls. Echoes of custodians passed, their armor glinting like ghosts. Each one turned toward Iolan, faceless and accusing. He recognized them all. Brothers lost in duty. Brothers who had guarded the throne until death, never questioning, never doubting. They were the perfect servants, and he was about to betray everything they had died for. His gauntlet trembled as he reached toward the sphere. The moment his fingertips brushed the surface, the golden material rippled like liquid fire. Pain surged through his body, not physical but spiritual. He was seeing through the Emperor's eyes now, living fragments of his endless torment. Every second of existence had become an act of consumption. Billions of souls per day burned to maintain his divinity. The Emperor was not living. He was being used. His flesh had become the engine of faith itself, and faith had become the weapon of control. The realization shattered Iolan's composure. He screamed, tearing his hand away, falling backward onto the marble floor. His armor smoked from psychic feedback, his eyes bleeding from the strain. Then, footsteps. Through the blinding haze, figures entered the chamber. 3 custodians, weapons drawn, their golden armor reflecting the dying light of the throne. They had felt the disturbance through the palace's psychic web. "Brother Iolan," one spoke, voice echoing through his vox grill. "What have you done?" He rose slowly, blood dripping from his mouth. "I have seen him." Their weapons hummed with lethal charge. "Then you have seen what you were never meant to." "Step away from the dais." "I cannot," Iolan whispered. He asked for help." A tense silence followed. Then, almost in pity, the leading custodian shook his head. "You have been touched by heresy. The Emperor does not ask. He commands." Iolan's eyes, wide with anguish, met his brother's. "Then you have not heard his voice." The custodians fanned out, encircling him. Every movement was perfect, elegant, practiced, inevitable. Iolan knew he could not win, but something within him, something ancient, human, refused to kneel. He drew his guardian spear. If obedience means his suffering continues, then obedience is treason. For the first time in 10,000 years, custodian met custodian in battle. Their clash was silent but cataclysmic. Blades of gold collided in bursts of psychic discharge, their strikes echoing through the sanctum like divine thunder. Sparks danced across marble floors as each blow carried centuries of training, faith, and fury. Iolan fought like a man possessed, or perhaps liberated. He parried, spun, struck with desperate precision. But his brothers were the embodiment of perfection. One caught his blade, twisting it aside. Another drove a kick into his chest, sending him crashing into a column. Still, he rose. Blood poured down his face. His armor cracked, but his resolve burned brighter than the throne's dying light. He is suffering. The golden throne burned brighter than it had in centuries. Its radiance tore through the dust-heavy air, cutting through the half-light of the sanctum like a blade. Every surface reflected its brilliance, the marble, the reliquaries, the broken armor of the fallen custodians. And yet, beneath the blinding glow, there was no triumph, only mourning. Iolan lay still at the base of the dais, his blood mingling with the sacred oil that dripped from ruptured cables. His body had gone cold, but his expression remained serene. as though he had glimpsed something beyond the suffering of gods. The surviving custodians stood motionless around him, their weapons lowered, their composure fractured. The voice they had heard, that single whispered plea, still echoed within their minds. It gnawed at the certainty that had defined their existence since the birth of the Imperium. The Emperor was eternal. The Emperor was omnipotent. The Emperor could not suffer, and yet they had heard him. The lead custodian, the one who had struck the killing blow, fell to his knees, armor clattering against the floor. His mind spiraled between duty and despair. "Forgive me, Father," he whispered, though whether he spoke to the Emperor or himself he did not know. The throne pulsed again, a soft wave of light rolling outward. It washed over them like a sigh, neither condemning nor forgiving. For the briefest instant, they felt warmth, something tender, impossibly human. Then it faded, and the chamber darkened. Far above, across the spires of Terra, the Astronomicon flickered. Astropaths throughout the Imperium gasped as the psychic beacon stuttered, its eternal flame faltering for a heartbeat. For most, it passed as a momentary distortion, a ripple of the warp, but to those attuned to its deeper hum, it felt like a pulse. A heartbeat. Within the Sanctum Imperialis, alarms whispered awake. Deep within the neural catacombs beneath the palace, tech priests and lex mechanics detected fluctuations in the Golden Throne's power conduits, readings they had not seen since the earliest days of the Great Crusade. Something within the machine was changing. One of the surviving custodians, Valen, turned to his brothers. "We cannot speak of this." His voice trembled, a crack in the otherwise unbreakable calm. "If word spreads, the ecclesiarchy will purge us before we can understand what we witnessed." Another shook his head. "And yet, how can we not speak of it?" He reached out to us. Valen's gaze hardened. "Then he is in pain. And if the Imperium has turned his divinity into torment, that is not faith. It is heresy." The words hung in the air like a forbidden relic. Custodians did not speak of heresy. They eradicated it. And yet now, standing before their dying god, they found themselves unable to tell the difference between blasphemy and truth. They gathered Ialon's body and carried it through the silent corridors, his armor scorched, his face unmasked. No one spoke. The echoes of their footsteps were drowned. Beneath the endless thrum of machinery, the sound of billions of lives burning every second to sustain a throne that devoured light itself. As they passed the Hall of Echoes, something stirred within the shadows. A robed figure stepped forward, a sister of silence, her expression unreadable, her pale skin illuminated by the golden glow of her torch. Her eyes moved from the body to the faces of the custodians. Though she could not speak, her silence was sharper than any accusation. Valen met her gaze. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Her response was a faint nod. Then she turned, motioning for them to follow. Together they descended deeper, into the ancient catacombs where the Imperium's secrets were buried. They entered a chamber few had ever seen, the original maintenance sanctum of the Golden Throne. Here, ancient symbols of the Mechanicum overlapped with prayers of the ecclesiarchy, a heretical fusion of machine and faith. The sister stopped before a mural carved into the wall, depicting the Emperor not as a god, but as a man, robed in gold, hands outstretched toward a sun eclipsed by shadow. Beneath it, in High Gothic, were etched the words, "Even the light must one day rest." Valen stared at the inscription, the words stirring something deep within him. "This is older than the Imperium." The sister nodded again. She reached into her robes and withdrew a small data slate, ancient and dust-caked. She placed it in Valen's hand and gestured toward the mural's heart. The data slate flickered to life, revealing a symbol long banned by imperial decree, the sigil of the sigillite. Malcador's voice, faint but unmistakable, whispered through the static. "If you are hearing this, the throne is failing, and the master of mankind cannot endure forever. The choice will come between worship and mercy." The roar of the Golden Throne became a storm. Its light flared in pulses that shook the palace foundations, throwing shadows that moved like living things across the sanctum walls. The custodians and the Sister of Silence shielded their eyes. As the mural behind them began to glow, lines of molten gold seeping from its carved sun like veins awakening after centuries of stillness. The data slate flickered again, though no hand touched it. Malkador's final message replayed, fragments overlapping. Choose mercy. The master of mankind cannot endure. The light will consume. Then silence. A silence so vast that even the hum of machinery seemed to vanish. When the light dimmed, Valen stood alone. The sister and his remaining brothers had vanished, not slain, not vaporized, but gone, as if erased from the space around him. The chamber was empty, save for the mural and the faint trace of incense. He stumbled backward, reaching for his guardian spear, his mind struggling to hold shape against the psychic pressure blooming inside his skull. The air thickened. It was no longer simply air, it was thought, memory, and judgment pressing inward. Then, from the heart of the throne itself, came a voice. It was not a sound, not truly. It was a vibration across the marrow, a resonance that turned his blood to glass. "Why do you wake me?" Valen fell to one knee, his armor trembling under the psychic weight. "My lord, I did not. I sought to understand." The voice came again, deeper, layered with tones no human organ could ever form. "Understand what? The burden of divinity, the cost of your faith?" Images flooded his mind. The Emperor, upon the throne, his body a ruin of gold and bone, his mind stretched across light years, holding back the warp like a dying dam against an endless ocean. He saw the sacrifices, billions burned in pyres to feed the Astronomican's flame. He saw Terra itself, hollowed and bleeding, sustained by worship that had become a cage. Valen gasped, his throat seizing under the pressure of revelation. "We serve you, always," he managed, though the words felt pitiful in the immensity of that presence. The voice softened, and for a heartbeat, it was human. "You serve what remains of me, but I remember what I was. Once, I dreamed of unity. Now I dream only of silence." The word struck him harder than any blade. Silence. The Emperor, the god of mankind, longed for silence. A tremor rippled through the chamber as the mural cracked. From its fissures, golden light poured out, forming shapes that flickered like memories made flesh. He saw armies marching beneath banners of flame, saw the Primarchs in their glory and ruin, saw the heresy burn the stars. Every vision came alive around him, the past bleeding into the present. And then he saw something else, something that did not belong to any record or myth. A golden figure standing amid the ruins of a dead galaxy. No worshippers, no armies, no throne, only the endless dark, and in his hands, the dim ember of a dying sun. The Emperor, stripped of godhood, wandering the void like a relic of his own dream. The image faded. Valen staggered forward, shouting into the silence. "What are you showing me? What do you want of us?" The light pulsed again, slower now, almost tender. "They say the Astronomican never flickered again. But that is a lie. For one brief instant, one heartbeat in the endless chronology of man, the great beacon faltered. Across the Imperium, ships drifted in confusion, their navigators screaming as the light that had guided humanity for 10,000 years dimmed to the faintness of a dying candle. Worlds whispered prayers in unison, thinking the end had come, and then, impossibly, it returned. But it was different. Fainter, gentler, no longer the scorching brilliance that seared across the warp like a blade. It glowed instead with the warmth of something remembered, something human. Those who could feel such things said it pulsed with rhythm, not the hum of machine conduits or the psychic grind of 10,000 sacrificed souls, but the slow, tired beating of a colossal heart, the heart of a man who had borne too much, who had seen everything, and finally mercifully forgiven it. Valen was never seen again. Neither was the sister. Some say they were taken into the throne itself, their forms transmuted into radiant echoes, bound forever to guard the place between divinity and death. Others whisper that they walked beyond the palace walls and vanished into the dawn, their armor stripped, their names forgotten, to live out what little humanity the galaxy still allowed. But the custodians who remained spoke in hushed tones of change. The light no longer burned their eyes when they prayed. The whispers that had haunted the sanctum, the tortured psychic screams that had once echoed through the palace corridors, were gone. In their place was silence, not the suffocating silence of fear, but the deep, sacred silence of peace. Across Terra, some claimed they could hear a faint murmur through the static, a voice woven into the Astronomican song, carrying words that no machine could record. Rest, just rest. The mechanicus refused to believe it. The ecclesiarchy declared it heresy. But for those who stood beneath the dawn that day, the first dawn untainted by ash or flame in centuries, belief no longer mattered. The emperor was still upon his throne. The light still shone, and yet something ineffable had changed. Perhaps the God of mankind had finally remembered what it was to be human. Or perhaps humanity had finally learned what it was to forgive a God. In the end, there were no more prayers shouted to the heavens. Only whispers, whispers that echoed through the empty halls of the imperial palace, carried on the soft hum of the machines that had outlasted empires. Whispers that told a story and of sacrifice, sorrow, and the long weary hope of a being too vast for love, too broken for wrath. And far above Terra, amid the trembling constellations, the light flickered once more, not in warning, not in despair, but in farewell.